behind the Catchment group and really the initiator for that. So yeah, we have her to thank for establishing that, really, the driving force behind it. I'd just like to ask Pat to welcome our special guests here today, and he knows far more about it than I do. I'll hand it over to you. Okay, John.
Well, I'd just like to introduce you to Mike and Sharon Barton from farm around back Taupo. So yeah, we were fortunate enough yesterday to Nick and Simon and I to go to their field day in Taupo, which was yeah, really great day. It was well done, well presented, yeah, great turnout, lots of representatives from different organisations, and yeah, lots of farming people there. It was great. So yeah, so it's Mike and Sharon. Welcome, thank you for coming. It's a big journey to come over here. And yeah, I know. Yeah, we don't have to go back tonight, so that's one thing. But yeah, Sue and I have been farming her family land here for 14 years, and since we first arrived here, our visions have changed, and we looked at our property and thought we can't carry on doing what we're doing after 3 or 4 years. So we got involved with different organisations, had lots of help with our retirement plantings, and now we're involved with the Whangawehi Catchment group and our riparian planting, which is happening at the moment. The fence is just about completed. Trees are starting to arrive on Monday. Yeah, there's 22,000 trees to be planted here over the next 2 years. Yeah, what I've stressed before when I've spoken a couple of occasions is with all our retirement areas and our plantings and our change in fertiliser products, it hasn't dropped our production at all. Our production is still kilograms of meat and milk per hectare, still getting slightly better each year. So change, yeah, I just believe it's got to happen, and yeah, we've got to do it collectively, try and get as many people on board as possible. And, but anyway, enough about me. I'm not here to level on. So that's about all I want to say at the moment.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'd just like to call on Kathleen. Kathleen Marvel is the key person behind Whangawehi Catchment Management Group, and as I said earlier, they are the drivers behind this day, and I'd like Kathleen just to explain a little bit about what this group is and how it came about.
Tēnā koutou katoa. The Catchment Management Plan for Whangawehi actually came out of our concern for the wastewater treatment plant that's situated behind the hills in one of the headwaters of the Whangawehi River, and it's behind these hills behind Mahia Beach settlement here. Our concern is because Whangawehi River is the sacred river of the iwi of Mahia, which is Whangawehi. But not only that, concerns were for the, for the safety of the freshwater fisheries and the marine fisheries out at the sea where the river goes out to. So that's how it was formed. Actually, the support came from most of the Malay and Mahia, and we managed to have an agreement, which is a memorandum of understanding with the Wairau District Council and Regional Council. We now have the Department of Conservation and all those government departments. Farmers have signed up to the agreement, and Māori Committee. Yeah. So yeah, it is becoming widely supported, and it's to protect our freshwater fisheries, the water itself, and the marine fisheries, and we plan to actually fence off both sides of the stream, plant natives there, manage our fisheries, and hopefully in years to come we'll have all the native birds come there. We'll have very enhanced fisheries as well.
Involved with project fairly recently, just as a catchment facilitator, liaising with farmers, so that's why I fit in here, and yeah, I'm fairly confident. So I'd like to hand over to Mike now, really is the key to the day, and following that, Nathan Heath will have a short talk. He's the Land Services Advisor for the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, so there'll be a brief talk about that at about 5 thereabouts.
Kia ora mai tātou. I ngā iwe o te motu tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. G'day everyone from Taupo. I want to talk to you today about what we've done, what we've experienced. I don't want to say that what we did was right or what we did is what you should do. I understand from Nick and from Pat that you just want to hear our story, and that story may or may not resonate with you, and it may or may not give you some ideas as to what you might do here. So that's kind of the ground rules, I think, if you like to put it that way. I'll see if I can get the technology to work. What I'm going to do is give you a little bit of a This is really what I want to talk about, the context in which I now farm. I want to look briefly at the New Zealand farming business model, and then the interface of that business model with nutrient caps. I don't think you can have conversations about protecting waterways without at the same time having some conversations about how we farm. Because the two, you can't do one without looking at the other, in my view, and I'll explain why. And then I want to talk a little bit about my science needs as they relate to our catchment, and then some thoughts on agricultural opportunities. Then I want to pose some questions for you based on what we've learned, and you've posed a whole series of questions for Sharon and I around branding and those sorts of things, and so we'll weave that into what we've done and try and answer your questions as we go. I'm going to talk about some stuff that farmers generally don't like. So if you don't agree with what I say so. If you don't understand what I say, then question me until you do. Because I've learned after 12 years of working with farmers in this space that if I'm talking to you and you're angry about something that I'm saying, you're not going to listen to anything else I'm going to say. So you might as well have it out with me right from the beginning. So if that can be the ground rules, I'm up for it, as long as you guys are. Just a bit about our farm. It's got a pointer here. Oh, I might show. Taupo Township's in that top corner of the lake there. We're just about here. That's a map of the entire catchment, everything that drains into the lake. Our farm is, we own 142 hectares and we lease another 8, so we're pretty small there. I won't talk about the brand stuff now for a minute. We can farm under emissions caps, but to do so you're going to have to cap livestock numbers and the class of stock. So if we're going to do that, do we as farmers just accept a consequent cap on our income? Or are we willing to start working together to redefine the New Zealand agricultural business model? And to put it bluntly, if you're going to put emissions caps in, we've got no other choice. There isn't anything on the science horizon that we've learned, and we've invested a lot of money on our farm and in the catchment. We all thought the science would come up with a silver bullet. Yeah, I'll be able to keep farming. There'll be something I can spray on the paddocks or something I can stick down their throat that'll stop them leaching nitrogen and I'll be sweet. The reality is there's no silver bullet. We might get the odd bit of silver buckshot now and then that'll give a few incremental gains, but I couldn't get a single scientist that would stand up in the Environment Court and say they could give us productivity gains under a nitrogen cap that would match our cost increases. And that's the rub, that's the problem. So this next slide is where I want you to start thinking and acting in a different way, but not as a farmer, as a consumer. All of us eat food, no matter how green we are, we all eat food. So my question to you as a consumer now is, do you actively seek out food that's produced in a way that protects water quality? Most, you look at most people, and I said that at an environmental pesticide conference. You know, these are the people that we were really against in the environment, the annual conference. And they looked at me like I was mad. But these are lawyers and accountants from the urban community, and they'd spent $1,000 each to go to this conference. They were spending $250 to go to the conference dinner. And I asked them, well, how did you choose the food for this conference dinner? You're the most environmentally aware people in the country. You're my target market. And suddenly the penny dropped. They hadn't made the link. But then we as farmers have never made the link, and we've never informed consumers about this issue. We've been so busy pushing back about we don't pollute waterways or whatever. We have to actually fess up and say we do. But don't own the problem. We've tried to own the problem, whereas the problem is actually with the consumer. So most consumers don't know where they can source that food. Of course they can't. And the reality is the only food they can source in New Zealand that's got a water quality component to it is our beef. There's nothing else available anywhere in the country. It's not to say we're flash, it's to say that most of us are not very good at dealing with this issue. So if you did know where to source that food, what premium would you be prepared to pay for that food? That premium is the true measure of how you value water quality. If you're not prepared to pay a premium, then you really don't value water quality. So what I'm starting to say now to any group of consumers, any urban person, that eating is the final step in the agricultural process. So everyone that eats, and that's everyone that eats is an agriculturalist. They have to own this problem along with the farmer. Otherwise, we aren't going to solve it. If you just sheet it back to the farmer and you keep selling cheap food, farmers will likely go out of business, or they'll push back so hard you won't get the water quality gains that you want. In the end, the consumer will be the final arbiter of whether we actually achieve this or not. So just some thoughts, some random thoughts again while you're feeding out silage, and I've lived and breathed this thing for 10 years now. No. We've lived it. And every other farmer in the catchment has lived it. It's not just us, it's every farmer in the catchment. So I don't believe we can continue having conversations about protecting water quality without having that parallel set of conversations around the New Zealand farming business model. So the bigger question then is, how do we start those conversations? How do we get farmers together to talk about it? How do we get policymakers in the mix? And how do we get processors and marketers in the mix? Those will be some of the questions that you confront if you were trying to get a brand associated with what you were doing here. I don't believe that New Zealand agriculture can continue to occupy the commodity agricultural space and mandate catchment limits or biodiversity. Somehow we have to establish brand values from both that water quality space and the biodiversity space that actually pays for the cost of doing these things. The money for it's not going to come from anywhere else. Farmers can't do it, you're not going to get it from government. Ask anyone in DOC about their funding. So somehow we have to have a plan as a nation to add brand value to what we produce such that it covers the cost of looking after our environment. This is what I need from scientists now. Any more science that talks about increasing outputs or increasing production has to be described in terms of dollars profit per kilogram of end leached. Otherwise I can't look at the business case. It needs to be embedded in overseer. I need scientists to start selecting and breeding animals, be they sheep, beef or deer, that are much more efficient at converting grass into protein. Because the more efficient they are, the less comes out in their urine. I've also learned in this process that cropping to regrass, to re-establish pastures, is probably not going to be sustainable in free draining soils in the future. Some of the research that we've done in the catchment and elsewhere shows that if you plant a winter crop, strip graze it with cattle, put in a summer crop, and then the following autumn put in your permanent autumn pasture, over that period you will have leached anywhere between 150 and 250 kilograms of N on a free draining soil. Now if the pasture only lasts 10 years, let's be generous, that's added 25 kilograms per hectare per annum to my leaching profile. I can't afford to graze animals on it because I'm above my nitrogen discharge amount. That to me is the elephant in the room in this whole issue. We have always thought that regrassing was fine. We didn't realise what we were leaching. So I need from scientists ways of establishing permanent pastures that leach a minimal amount, and they're probably going to have to last at least 100 years. So that I can, if you like, spread the cost of their establishment. So if it only lasts, if I say I leach 200 kilograms to establish a really good pasture, if it lasts 10 years, that's 20 kgs a year. If it lasts 100 years, it's 2 kilograms. That's reasonable. Even at 50 years, at 4 kilograms, it's probably a bit much. Now you talk to scientists, and you particularly talk to seed breeders, and they think you're mad. But I put that on the table because that's the sort of thing we're going to have to confront in the future. We're talking constantly to scientists now, and basically we need scientists to come up with ways where we can profile our food from an environmental point of view. We need science to start thinking in the same space as us and come up with ways of hand on heart being able to say to our consumers around the world, we're doing the right thing by the environment and here's the data, here's the science. So that we can from there get verifiable brand standards that will resonate across the globe. Because 85% of our production is sold offshore. And if you're in Beijing, why would you give a toss about what the water quality in Lake Taupo is? So somehow we have to get that message across, and somehow we have to choose consumers that are willing to pay more to do that, but they're only ever going to do it if we've got scientifically backed data to prove our claims. We've got to establish premiums that will fund new opportunities in this space. And we've got to stop selling our food so cheaply. We have got to start internalising the real environmental costs into the price that we charge. So, given all that context, my first question to you as a group is, what's your position in this space? Where do you sit on it? Have you reached an agreement on any of the issues, or is maybe this the start of a discussion? So, you need to think about that. These are some other questions which I don't expect answers to now, but based on what we've learned through developing our own brand, can you really build a brand advantage on your own? Probably not. So if you're going to do that, then who are the people that you need to partner with? Your target markets, and there are enough of them out there around the world, are concerned about water quality. Any focus group research that any of the meat companies or the dairy companies in New Zealand have done overseas with consumers, they ask them what sustainability means, and for most of them it's linked to water quality. Because all of us can remember creeks that we used to be able to swim in. All of us can remember water that we could fish in once. And all around the world there are people who now can no longer do that in water bodies that they remember. So you talk to them about sustainability and water quality is the first thing they think of. So you've got people all around the world that are willing to listen to your story. But my question to you is, how are you going to reach them? Can you even reach them? Because the costs of doing it are high. You've got to decide, if you haven't got the resources as a small community to do it, can you find a partner that you can work with that will do it? Now, the next question is, should you work in conjunction with your regional authority? They have a legislative responsibility to protect water quality under the RMA. So they're going to be the ones that eventually will frame some laws around this, and they will be auditing you. So like we've done with the regional council, maybe they can have a role as being the independent verifier of your claims. Now, for a lot of farmers, working that closely with the regional authorities is like, no, I won't say it. But you know what I mean. It's worse than dealing with IRD. But somehow they've got a legislative responsibility to fix the problem. They can't fix the problem without working with you. So somehow we've got to get together. I said this yesterday at our presentation. I was in Southland a while ago talking to farmers down there, and one really hard case Southland dry farmer said, you know what I've learned over my time? If you're not sitting at the table negotiating with these buggers, you're on the menu. So we either push away from the regional councils and we're on the menu, or we sit down together and we design a whole new menu between us. And so think about whether you want to work with your regional authority to help develop the verification process. That will be critical to developing a brand. And in the end, can you turn that into a brand value that will allow you to grow your income under a constrained production system?
Mike, before you leave that slide, just going back to the international market you touched on there, do you see it as a possibility to grow the Taupo brand out of just supplying the hotels and exclusive restaurants in the Taupo area?
I have to. We produce more beef and lamb and venison in the Taupo catchment than all the tourists that come here can consume. So I've got to take, and the fact that the lake's looking at them while they're eating their meat, or they're looking at the lake, makes my job a bit easier. We've already talked to a lot of players, industry players in terms of wholesalers and restaurants and retailers in Auckland and Wellington. They think we can do it there because most people at some point have visited Taupo or know someone that had a batch there. So there's enough of a connection there to make it work. The acid test will be whether we can crack it in South Korea or
It's when you step away from the knowledge
We've got enough interest from wholesalers to at least try. Now, I'll be honest with you, and I don't want to pop your bubble here, but I don't think the answer in this lies in Taupo beef and Waimakariri beef and Kaituna beef. The answer lies in eventually, this is the long term, eventually every farmer that's working in a catchment under a catchment-wide plan that's designed to protect that catchment, if they're doing everything that they need to do, regardless of whether they're in Taupo or here or Waimakariri, if they're doing everything to the gold standard, basically, then they should get a gold standard price for their produce. And we should be branding it then as New Zealand beef, New Zealand lamb, New Zealand milk, that is grown in a way that we can verifiably prove. That's the long game. And that's probably 20 years away, to be honest.
But that's how you would connect to an
That's how
export
you
side.
connect to an export market at that point, because the resources you need to throw at developing a brand on an export scale are way beyond what you and I can ever bring to it.
And more than New Zealand Inc.
Yeah. But in the meantime, the lessons that can be learned from doing your own thing in a small way are incredibly valuable, and what we've learned is that through this whole process is you bring people together, and we've been working together for 12 years, keeping farmers together for 12 years is a mission of its own, but the lessons you learn by doing that actually build a community, grow a community, and grow your business. So I'm not saying don't do the local thing, that's for you to choose, but eventually if we scale this up, it's got to be a New Zealand thing, as Sharon said.
Some of us were at a meeting in Gisborne yesterday. Ming Foon spoke. Now, what he
Who
was
spoke,
saying-
sorry?
Ming Foon, the mayor of Gisborne. He just come back from a trip to China, and he was saying literally exactly what you're saying there. And he's talking about New Zealand Inc. And it seems like you guys have taken that extra step where you've actually brought the market, the potential market, into you. So you're already having a sales increase level opportunity by actually having brought the market to you as tourists.
True, and
I'll take the message back.
we have talked to tourists and said, you know, if you went back to your own country, would you buy our beef in the future? You know, because it's not your river, what are you going to worry about? It's not your lake. And the few people that, because everyone always, when you talk to them in that situation, they think what you're trying to do is lovely and they want to say the right thing, you know. But a lot of them said, yes, we would. And I'd said, well, why? Well, our lakes and rivers are being polluted back home. If I can show my farmers back home that I'm willing to pay a premium for your meat where you've sorted this issue, maybe they'll do the thing, maybe they'll do the right thing over there. Now that blew me away, and it was only one or two people, but gave me the confidence to think maybe there is legs under this issue on a broader, intergenerational, cross-country basis. That was kind of where I was going to stop. There's a few of our predominantly Charolais Angus crossheaders, a little way off becoming Taupo Beef.
So what age of those, excuse me, what age of those cattle you get them to killable size?
Well, I need them off the farm before they're 25 months of age, 24 months. I have, most of them, like we sent cattle away 3 weeks ago that were, 6 weeks ago now, so they were about nearly 17 months of age, and they killed out 269 kilos. They were 1 kilo under the carcass weight target that we'd set. But we don't get that, all of them, and there's always a tail, as any farmer would know. There's always some that just don't do well. And we've been hammered by 2 of the worst droughts in living memory in a row. So we had to go back to the chefs and say, look, we're not going to get the target weight. What do you want to do? Do you want to stop selling our meat for a while? Or are you prepared to accept a smaller cut? And they all said the same thing. We don't want to stop this. This brand has become such a part of our restaurant. We'll accept a lesser carcass weight. So if you build the relationships and build the understanding between all the players, they'll accept climatic variation. Because you can't import a whole container load of Australian beef and call it Taupo Beef. So, but it was lovely to get that support and feedback.
But we stay in contact with them regularly in that situation. So in the drought last year, it probably was for about a period of 6 to 8 weeks where we couldn't quite get to spec that 280 to 320 kilos. And I think what we did is we stayed in contact with each of the chefs. And by then it was on national television, the fact that there was a drought affecting all the regions. So they were really, they wanted to work with us. But we certainly kept that communication channel until I felt like, yep, we're back on target again. So it lasted almost up to 2 months when we were slightly less up, so there, which had an impact on their, I suppose, their fillet sizes were just slightly smaller than they normally would be.
So you've got to put a lot of time and effort into those relationships. And whoever does that has got to be willing to give up a lot of time off farm.
All your animals breed in the catchment area?
That's what we'd like to get eventually, but we can't always get that at the moment.
So that's the source now.
So basically we're saying they've got to be finished, they've got to have 12 months of their life in the catchment, and they've got to be from a farm that's consented. But this year we just took under contract the first line of 80 heifers that were bred in the catchment to contract. We just paid him the ruling schedule, and he's willing to take that, or the ruling price for weaners, should I say. He's willing to take that at the moment, because he's still working on his breeding, and there was a bit of variation in the range, greater than the spec we wanted, weight range. But he's willing to look beyond this first year, and eventually we would like to get a premium back to him. He needs one.
What numbers are you talking about?
Oh, we're small beer, we're doing between 10 and 20 animals a week.
And you mentioned before that when you first started it, that when your COVID cut was on, that you organised the best cuts for the chefs. So what happens to all the meat cuts?
Really good question. I can add $10 a kilo to the price of eye-fillet, and that comes out at 1.5 cents to the farmer on their carcass weight, because the eye-fillet's only 4% of the body weight. If I add 50 cents to the trim and the mince at a retail level, that adds 20 cents a kilo to the schedule for the farmer. So this was only ever going to be successful if we got rid of the whole carcass. What we do now is the animals are killed at the Ruakura at the plant, and they're quartered and chilled down to less than 2 degrees Celsius, and then they're trucked to a butcher wholesaler in Taupo, who we've been working with right from the get-go. He dry ages the animals on the bone for 10 days, and then breaks them down, and then vacuum packs all the prime cuts and wet ages them for another 2 to 3 weeks before we sell them. He's been an integral part of the process, and basically all the trim that comes from those animals is now sold as either Taupo Beef sausages or mince, and all of them gets a premium. So, and ironically, he rang us the other day and said, "I'm not getting enough trim off the number of animals that you're killing." So we've got to the point now where we're utilising the whole carcass. We've got a large pool of locals who go to that butcher specifically to buy our meat. We've had some fantastic publicity, we've been very lucky. Michelle Laos, the chef that I talked about earlier, I don't know if you watch MasterChef. I mean, food programs are everywhere, but the second to last issue, just before the final, the one before where there were still 3 couples in it, Michelle was he was the kind of bulldog chef they brought in to really rough these contestants up. And he used Taupo Beef. It was a Taupo Beef rump cup that he got them to cook.
Took it from Taupo up to all.
He took it up there, and the butcher went mad the next day. It's amazing what something like that will do. So we've spent no money on advertising in the entire time we've developed the brand. We've spent money on the brochures and table cards, but that's all. All the effort and energy that's developed the brand has gone into what I call relationship marketing. Building trust with people and understanding each other's position. Because people don't believe ads. And this is a story that's far too deep and far too interconnected with so many players that the only way you're going to get it across is via relationships.
Honey, can I just say something a minute?
Yeah, I was going to sit down for a minute.
No, you're fine, Stanley. You asked how did we deal with it at the beginning, and it has been very much a stage-by-stage thing. That first 4 months, we worked with a different processor than what we're working with now. We worked with that processor for 18 months, and the arrangement was very different because when we did the experiment with just 3 different restaurants. There were 3 different scale restaurants, from if you were thinking like a 5-star, 4-star and 3-star. So we used 3 different ones, and at that time we used the eye fillet at the Hilton, we used Scotch at the, say, 4-star restaurant, and we used another cut at the other. And obviously that doesn't use the whole beast. It took us 4 years to get a processor that was willing to do the trial. We had lots of no's in our face. And we persevered seeing CEOs from different companies. Sometimes it was because it's such a small scale that what I've had to learn is for a processor, everything that's important to it is efficiency. Any change costs them money. So to deal with suddenly 10 animals as an experiment from the Barton's farm, they just thought, ugh. Or they didn't have the technology at that time to be able to guarantee traceability back to our personal farm and say that this meat has come from our farm. So it took 4 years to get that. When we finally did, and the processor concerned that was willing to do the test, we basically had to just get them to agree that we would buy off them the eye fillet of those, say, 10 or 20 animals that we sent, and the Scotch, and the other. They promised for the experiment, for the 4 months, that they would just use the rest of the animal in their own channels. They saw themselves as a processor with innovation, who liked to think that they were innovative. So by doing the experiment with us, they allowed us to work with them, but they weren't prepared to sell the money directly to the restaurant. They said they would sell it to us, we had to pay for it, and then we had to on-sell it to the restaurant. They didn't want any kind of financial risk at that time. Mike and Sharon were keen to do anything, whatever it took. We were desperate and dateless. So we were willing to do anything. And so that continued for 18 months, where I, 4 weeks in advance, would put in what I called a kill order. Gosh, I hope people in the States weren't watching at the time. Monitoring emails.
The heading was always kill order.
I know, and I thought, oh my goodness, I didn't think about it at the time, but for 18 months, I would send an email asking a kill order. They agreed to actually age that meat for a month, so I was making decisions a month in advance on what was to be aged. Then that would be sent down, and we would buy it from them, and then on-sell it to the restaurant. So it wasn't an ideal situation, and Mike and I did not we never intended to be wholesalers, but by default, we became wholesalers for the first 18 months. Probably the first 6 months, we only worked with the restaurants, and then some people in Taupo started asking, oh, well, where can we buy this meat? They maybe had the meat at one of our restaurants, and they wanted to buy it. So we asked the butcher, would he be willing to have some of our meat at his thing? He was very cynical to start with, completely cynical, and just thought, oh, people are not going to pay more for your beef. What's the difference with your beef and any other beef? But he agreed to take for 4 months the Scotch and the sirloin and sell it in his butcher shop. And we asked him again, could you charge more for our Scotch and sirloin than any other? And little by little, people kept coming in and buying it and asking, oh no, we just want the Taupo Beef Scotch, we don't want the Angus. At the end of 18 months, he came to us because he thought we were about to sign a deal going to Auckland and Wellington. And at that time, he came to us and he wanted to be part of the action because he was seeing us getting up, meeting trucks late at night with a whole bunch of meat that was going out to some of his restaurants that he thought as potential restaurants for himself because he was a retailer and a wholesaler. So by then he approached us and said, I know I was cynical at the beginning, but I'd like to see if I could work with you. And at that stage we were able to, we handed over what we had made as a wholesale business, we handed it over to him in exchange for a premium for us to offer other farmers a premium at that time.
So we've grown the business to, we turned over about $400,000 in prime goods to probably 8 or 10 restaurants by then, and we were selling some to the butcher, We sold it to him at a lesser price because by then we were using his chillers and one of his chilled trucks to deliver all the stuff. And he saw pallet loads of meat coming in each week. And going, they was all gone by the next morning. So he could see by then, he said, I can't believe you pulled this off, but he said that you have, and I want to be part of it. So we owe him a lot because we basically used his facilities to sell meat to his customers for 18 months. But
Or his potential
his
customers.
potential customers, yes. So
It's just envious.
we didn't charge him for that wholesale business that we developed. We just gave it to him and said that you've got to give us a premium now on the whole carcass and any farmer that we choose to supply you with. And he's honoured that, and we've been doing that now for a couple of years.
So at that stage where he was just initially taking the scotch and the sirloin, when we changed processes, he now gets a whole carcass. Before he used to still get whole carcasses, but now he only gets Taupo Beef whole carcass. He breaks it down, and now we are actually finally able to use more of the beast. The challenge right from the start was being able to utilise the lesser bits. People would pay more for the eye fillet, but to get more for the mince. So for him to develop then a Taupo Beef sausage, Taupo Beef mince, he's now able to charge slightly more for those things, and he's utilising the whole carcass, which is what we, right from the beginning, needed to do, and certainly the processor kept challenging us that that was necessary for us to do if we wanted to actually get a premium.
He's selling our Taupo Beef sausages at the moment for $15 a kilo. You can buy a beef sausage from Countdown Supermarket over the road for $6 a kilo. You'd hardly call it a sausage, but you've also got to realise that the single mum with 3 kids on a benefit is never going to buy our sausages at this stage. There's a target market that will. Over time, you might get those single mums, when their kids go to school and start learning about the environment, they'll start talking to mum and saying, hey, maybe we don't eat so much meat each week, but we'll pay a bit more for it because of these things. This is an intergenerational process, but it's about picking your market early on.
We chose the name Taupo Beef purely because we thought if people come to our area as a visitor, they're more likely to remember the meat from the name of the place, the name of the lane. What we've found is the people that buy our product are 3 different groups of people. Some who come to our area and they just want to buy a local product. They come in and say, oh, what's local that we can buy? We've also got buy-in from some of our local residents who are finally proud to have a local product, because we don't have any kind of local products as such in Taupo. So that's one group. So the name has actually worked well for us in that sense. The other group, of course, are those that are environmentally inclined, desperately wanting to look after the lake. They're also supporting us. So some of the people that were against us in court years ago with the Lakes and Waterways Action Group and Forest and Bird, they're now buying our product because they want to support the farmers and keep them viable for future generations too. Then the third group of people, as time went on, within about 18 months, people kept saying, what makes your beef better or different from anyone else? Initially, I just used to say the green tick. We're the only ones in the country to have a green tick. We're the only ones who can hand on heart say we're protecting waterways and protecting the lake for future generations. But as people started asking more, we realised there were certain things we could say that some consumers felt were really important. One, the meat is grass-fed. And nowadays, a lot of farms are using palm kernel, and we're finding some consumers don't want anything to do with palm kernel. So all of our farmers that we use are only using grass-fed, and their supplements are all
supplements
grass grown on their own farm. So we're finding now from health across in the States, they're now pushing grass-fed beef over grain-fed beef for health benefit reasons. So there's been a change in some of the overseas markets, the views between grass and grain-fed. So that's something that we push with our farmers. Another one, we say it's aged for a minimum of 4 weeks. The aging process was purely to improve the tenderness of the meat. The third thing we promise the consumer there's no antibiotics used. If, for example, Mike and I have to give an animal antibiotics because they've been unwell, it doesn't happen often, but when we do, we just put an extra tag in the other ear, so we identify it, and sadly it just goes to the supermarket chain. It doesn't go into our Taupo Beef brand. We also promise there's no growth hormones. Now I'm finding that we have a lot of retirees in Taupo as well, and those retirees are now at an age and stage of life where they all have friends who have got cancer or something else. They're becoming a group of consumers who are concerned about what goes into their bodies and what's gone into the food that then enters. So the fact that we can promise them there's no antibiotics, there's no growth hormones, that's the third group of people that are also supporting us and buying our beef now. The other thing I've just put is that it's from a consented farm operating under new environmental regulations to protect the water quality of Lake Taupo. So this is something I put together purely that sits on the counter at the butcher, so people going into the butcher know what they're getting. The other thing is they have a thing with brochures. There's a brochure that we designed at the start, and if anyone wants one, they can take one from there. But it's got the environmental tick that the council produced on the back. It has a happy face of all the farmers on their farm so that people know who they are, who are those people, and a picture of their farm. And also talks about what those farmers have done in order to, I suppose, reduce their environmental footprint.
And we have photographs of cattle in paddocks quite well spread out. You don't want to photograph too close because people don't like to eyeball the meat that they're about to eat.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Well, I'll perhaps just finish with one last anecdote. The bulk of the chefs that we originally worked with told us that quality was all they cared about. And they would say things like, well, our customers are so affluent, they don't really give a toss about the environment, they just want high quality. And I thought, okay, that's okay, you've got to start somewhere. One of those chefs recently catered for a wedding at the Hilton, and Sharon was talking to one of the guests later on, and she said, oh, that chef that works there, he gave us this lovely story about how he's using our beef because it's protecting the lake from sulphur. So he got the story wrong, but suddenly the environmental issue meant something to him. So I don't care why people buy our beef. What we have found though is over time they start to understand the environmental message of it, even if they never came to it from that way in the first place. But I think we've gone way over time. So
Thank you. Sharon, that was fantastic. Fantastic. And yeah, one thing it does point out, I suppose, early on in your talk actually, that is dear to most farmers is how their costs are creeping up as a percentage of income, and it certainly does make everybody think. And yeah, it's a time of change. And the other point I think is that you've put in such a lot of hard work to get to where you are. It's certainly quite impressive to hear what you've gone through. Thank you. Yeah, Nathan Heath from Regional Council is going to give us some information on what's happening at Hawke's Bay. Sorry.
No, you're right. Man, am I happy that that question that Mike raised in the middle about should you work with your regional council went the right way.
I meant it, mate.
Okay, just to give you a bit of a background, a few people probably know who I am. Nathan Heath. I am the Land Services Advisor for Hawke's Bay Regional Council. Basically what that means is I have a big role in developing the programs that the council uses to complement the sticks. So you know, you're not going to solve everything by rules and regulations. There are a lot of things that we can do, and it's happening right here in front of you right now, that we can work out solutions that don't require rules and laws and everything. And so I have a big role in that. My father taught at Te Mahi for many years, and so this is home for me, and I was just sitting at that seat there looking at the beach going, this spot here used to be a very productive spot for 11-year-old. Tuatua's on this side, and same, the old man back was like lost bulk was on that side. He used to make it killing. So yeah, very fond memories of the place. Nick basically sort of said to me, can you put a bit of context to the date around, following on from Mike, which was a big call in the first instance, to just sort of say, you're not immune to some of the issues and the challenges that Mike's faced. It is coming your way to some degree, the whole issue around water quality. But also to create a slightly different context around the benefits of working together collectively. From my experiences overseas, I've spent quite a few years now working overseas. I started off as an agricultural soil scientist, and I'm still certified as a soil scientist, but having spent quite a few years in Ecuador and then Australia, you start sort of realising that that the impact that agriculture is having is quite significant, because in those two countries in particular, you see it really quickly and really abruptly. And so I thought, what a better place to come back with all this really good Australian knowledge than New Zealand, because you guys just love to hear all about it. Okay, so the freshwater debate. Basically, since I've been gone and when I came back, three things have moved on really quick. The appreciation around water quality and its deterioration, and the fact that we're pulling a lot of water out of the system, using it for irrigation, really come to the fore. We're aware now that things have deteriorated quite a bit, particularly in the last 20 years, matched pretty closely to the intensification of agriculture. There's also been quite significant changes in central government policy and approaches. We now have what they call a national policy statement around freshwater, and that sets the guidelines that regional councils like us have to now go out and implement around water quality and water quantity, so how much water you can pull out of the system and what quality it needs to have. So that's locked into law now, and we're actively doing that. But there's also one of the biggest things is the change in community expectations. The people's attitudes to farming and water quality, they've really gone west, and almost too much so now. And I think that's been probably the most marked change of all. There's also been some really high-profile cases. Mike's example that he's talked about before in Lake Taupo, you've got Rotorua Lakes as well, you've got Horizons and their one plan, and very much now it's our turn. So I've been quite heavily involved in the Tuki Catchment plan change. And as a bit of a background to that, it is a river system under stress. So unlike Lake Taupo, this is a river that has had a lot of use around it. It's been quite modified, with flood controls and bending and straightening and drainage and all that sort of stuff. Water quality issues, there's lots of algae in it in the summertime. There's always been algae in it, but there's more now. And in particular, a lot of the water was being sucked out of it for irrigation too much. And so consents were up for renewal, and we thought, okay, what are we going to do with this? The MPS was looming. We needed to have a plan to improving the water quality and the quantity in the Tuki. Looking at it very holistically, we thought, well, one of the obvious ways of doing it is putting an irrigation scheme. Despite what the connotations people have with irrigation, it actually ticks a large number of the boxes. First of all, it is really the only way, without putting a lot of people out of business, that we can raise the flow in the Tuki. Otherwise, we have to take it back from people who are already irrigating. And we said, well, we're not going to open slather here. We're going to put some serious controls around farming and nutrient loss and that sort of stuff around it. So we don't think we're going to cause too many water quality problems. And so we've, you may have seen in the news, we've put that forward and through the EPA board, and it hasn't quite gone according to plan as far as we're concerned. But it's as it currently stands, the dam got a consent approval, but the conditions around the water quality rules in particular are quite hard. And so we've got a long way to go to work out the implications of that, but I'll elaborate on those a little bit more not too long. So how we went about the Tuki, and the reason I'm telling you this is it'll be a similar process here. Community values. So what's important to the community defines what objectives we have for the waterway. So there's lots of consultation and that sort of stuff, and values, and what's important to you about waterways, and that's the essence of what these plans are built around. The water quality and the quantity targets are set to meet those freshwater objectives. And then ultimately the policies, the rules, the regulations, the programs that I might help create are how we go about implementing something that moves you towards those quality and quantity targets. So the Tuki, unlike Lake Taupo, is actually phosphorus limited. It's a different scenario. And our original intention was to very much focus on managing phosphorus, but to manage the nitrogen in a slightly different way that's been done elsewhere in New Zealand. for a couple of reasons. The first being that it already was quite high in the tuki-tuki. So if we were going to manage the algae by managing the nitrogen in the tuki-tuki, we were going to have to claw back a lot of existing production. And we thought, well, actually, that's not a clever way of going about things. So let's manage nitrogen for a slightly different reason. We'll manage it to avoid any impact on aquatic health. And we'll manage phosphorus, primarily with a real focus on phosphorus, to manage the slime. So we put that forward, and they sort of rejected that and said, no, you're going to go back to the old school way of doing it. You're going to manage nitrogen to maintain ecological health, and you're going to manage phosphorus as well to maintain algae. And we've ended up with a system at this point in time, and there's a long time to go, it's still being considered by the board. We've ended up with a system that has a nitrogen cap to it, and that nitrogen cap down in the tuki-tuki is based on a system called the land use classification. Some of you may have seen it, some of you may not. It basically gives the land a value in terms of its capability, its productive potential, that sort of stuff. And we've now sort of got a cap based on that. So if you've got class 1 land, which is the best land, you get 30 kgs of nitrogen, down to class 8, which is the worst, you get down to about 3, and it's relatively graduated on that basis. The cap down on the tuki-tuki, probably, if you look at dairy farmers, 20% of them are under it, around 20%, 25% are at it, 25% would be over, and 25% would be well over. So it's a significant impact. But probably the most marked condition that we've had back from the board is this 0.8 dissolved inorganic nitrogen limit. That is very significant for land users down there. That is round about 40 to 45% clawback on existing nitrogen losses. That's going to require, 6,000 hectares of forestry to stop offsetting the amount of nitrogen coming out of there. So it's a significant limit. We've also had a rule around farm environmental management plan. So now everybody in the tuki-tuki has to have a farm environmental management plan. That's quite a detailed report. It's, they're in the vicinity of 70 hours to put together, and they cost them in the vicinity of $5,000. And so there's over 1,000 of those required on the tuki-tuki.
And that's compulsory?
That's compulsory.
For each farm?
For each farm at this stage. And we have rules around stock exclusion. So we're not saying we don't prescribe fencing, but there's a rule around you need to get your livestock out of the waterway. How you go about it is up to you, but you have to have your cows out of. Cows in particular, we're not focusing on sheep. Sheep aren't part of the issue, but you've got to keep cows out of the water, and that includes water that doesn't run all year as well. And then after all of that, and we've hit you over the stick with all these things, then we sort of say, well, how about some voluntary action around phosphorus? So in terms of trying to manage the water quality in the tuki-tuki, which is phosphorus-based, we've really made life, well, we haven't, but others have made life very hard for us in terms of going about doing that. So, yeah, where it goes is interesting to see. We've the EPA board's taken a bit more time to consider our draft decision response, and yeah, we'll be hoping with interest that there is some changes to their response, because I mean, really, if you look at the outcome for the tuki-tuki, we do need to focus on the phosphorus. We do need to reduce that, and this is not helping our cause in terms of focusing on that outcome. So, see how it goes. So, I mean, in terms of the catchment plan, sorry, not a very good map, but we've done the tuki-tuki here. We're currently working on the Hiratonga up here and the Mohaka at the same time. So the Hiratonga in particular is a big challenge for us, because obviously, you know, that's 80% of the pork-based primary product production comes out of that area in terms of dollar value. And there are a few challenges. Karama in particular, you know, it goes through a lot of urban areas, and it's very contaminated. That'll be a challenge. Some of the other rivers aren't too bad. The Ngaruroro and the Turaikuri aren't too bad. But yeah, we've got to work our way ultimately as part of this national policy statement all the way north and all the way south and along the coast. So, implications from all this on you guys. The Warrell catchment plan, I was just talking to the planners today, and they tentatively sort of said that there was some thought processes around initiating a process up here around 2016, 2017. But what's great to see is you guys are already taking the forward step, and you know, we can talk about things at that big catchment scale, but really the focus at this scale is what we're really talking about getting action done, getting things things really progressing. So, you know, from a Whangawehi perspective, I haven't been part of the process, but I'm aware that, you know, there's some challenges here as well. It's a bit more focused around the E. coli in particular, and you know, I've heard of reports of Mahi Beach breaching some thresholds and some standards in terms of water quality, which is quite surprising for me, you know, coming back here for first time for a long time. But what I'd suggest to you, following on from Mike's talk, is that there are market signals. There are environmental market signals that you need to tap into that are going to have an impact on your decision making and how you structure your business into the future. And those market signals aren't just the rules and regulations that you're seeing in these plans. Having been part of the process, those rules and those regulations are often a negotiation. And so there are trade-off in terms of getting to a point that we've sort of met some middle ground, and let's put that in and work towards getting those done. Have a look at what those freshwater objectives are. Have a look at the values behind those freshwater objectives, because I can tell you now, with the ramping up of community expectations, people aren't going to give up until they've gotten pretty close to that end game. So unless you're going to play catch up all the time, look at the end game. Look at where people are driving you in terms of the objectives, freshwater objectives. Because yeah, it will influence your business if you're just going to keep playing catch up. So from my experience, some of the things that have worked well is very much working together. I mean, despite what people think, Hawke's Regional Council or regional councils, we're actually a natural resource management agency. We're not an environmental group. Our role is to find a middle ground where we get all the outcomes, the maximum amount of outcomes, economically, environmentally, culturally and socially as possible. We're not here to drive an agenda down this way or an agenda down that way. We're trying to find some middle ground. And really how we find that middle ground is by working together. Can't do it on our own. Setting realistic timeframes and contexts. At the moment, we're all on freshwater. We all want it now, and so that's driving how we do business. Inappropriate. I mean, you guys, you all know that once we finish with freshwater, we're probably going to move on to something else. Climate change, biodiversity, other things that are all going to loom into the horizon. And we're all talking about, you know, come on, let's get it done now. And we know that change, in particularly hill country, it's a 20-year game. So until you start thinking of these problems in these contexts, we're going to keep sort of having these issues and fights and arguments and that sort of stuff. There needs to be an attitude change, no doubt, and on all sides. I'm not saying it's a farmer fault, it's not a regional council fault. We all need to change our attitudes to working together and finding some collective common ground. And we need to take ownership of the problem. You can't deny it, keep denying that it's not us, like Mike greatly put right at the front. I mean, the modelling that we've done, in the Tuki, one of the catchments that we have a group like this working in, 95% of the phosphorus comes from farming. And they've admitted, you know, that it started off there's a town effluent pond in there, and they're all blaming the town effluent pond, and you know, it's all their fault, but the town is. And we sort of did some modelling around it and found that really its contribution wasn't great. Most of it was coming from farmland, 95%. And that acknowledgement, we've moved on really quickly to a new space, you know, which is, okay, what do we do about it? So that's, you know, taking ownership of what the issues are. And the big one, and this is where you guys have a huge role. To me, the solutions are largely systems. They're not about, it's not about just putting a mitigation on top of a mitigation on top of a mitigation until you've reached the goal. It's having a look at your whole farm system. And you know that better than anybody else, particularly anybody from regional council. And it's tweaking how you do things. It's looking outside of the box. And this is a great example. You've just heard a great example about looking outside of the box in terms of what else can we do in this space. So, I mean, there's a real future in taking that path. And look, from a brand perspective, and I call it a bit of catchment communism, for want of a better word, Mike really put it great right at the front, really eloquently. There is safety in numbers, and that analogy about, you know, if you're not part of the process, you're on the menu, well, that's perfect, because it's true. I mean, there is safety in numbers. And there is, like Mike was saying, there is a bit of a vacuum in terms of governance. And what I mean about governance is people who write rules and regulations and policies and that sort of stuff that influence the decisions you make and the actions you take. And if you have a look in the sheep and beef sector and the hill country sector, it's a bit of a mess. You've got central government, you've got regional councils, you've got federated farmers, beef and land, local governments. Farmers themselves are all fighting over each other and chipping over and falling over and trying to get some coherence and some future, you know, certainty around the direction that we're going. And the best way, from my perspective, of getting some buffer between political whim and what you guys need to do is govern back as a group of people yourselves. You know, in a natural resource management world, there's a lot of power in that. And you know, we haven't quite got that model right just at this point in time. We're still learning, and it's been quite surprising. You know, we're as far forward as we think we are in New Zealand in terms of, you know, we had a Resource Management Act for everybody else. I still think we've sort of got stuck in gotten so used to how we use it that we've forgotten to actually appreciate there's new ways of going about making natural resource management decisions. And a lot of those are around, let's get down to this level. Let's have a conversation at this table, rather than some boffins sitting up there writing some policy rules and regulations and throwing it out. So, you know, local plans for local people, we have all parties around the table give you legitimacy that you require. You know, part of the process we've had in Tuki, we've done a lot of this table talk, and we've had external parties like Fish and Game, Forest and Bird, who had nothing to do with the catchment, didn't live in the area, came in at the last minute, turned it into a legal process, won the day. And you know, you can't keep doing it in that way. It can't be a legal battle when it's not taking into account the needs and desires of the local community, and the fact that if you guys can come around the table and collaborate and come to a collective decision, and we not accept that, what's the point? I mean, so that's, you know, really key message. And it's not just a technical solution to me. You know, again, in Mike's case, you know, basically nitrogen in particular is a problem of urine per unit area. So there's two ways of fixing the nitrogen problem. You reduce the amount of urine, reduce the number of cows, or you spread it over a greater area. If you've only got a property of that size, you're very limited with spreading it outside of that area. But there are social solutions. You know, if you're having catchment conversations, there are people in your catchment who have room to move, have a lot of extra room for nitrogen leaching, and it's putting people together who, at particular times of the year, if they take their cows out and spread them over somewhere else, you actually go a long way to meeting the challenge. So, I mean, it's a new space for us, and it's a long way to go before we're probably going to be able to look at that, but don't rule it out as being an important component going forward. The power of the group in particular is around your ability to collectively bargain. Don't underestimate the value that you already have on your farms. Blocks of bush, native fauna, all those sorts of things that people who are supping on cappuccinos and have like Norfolk going, oh, love, take that. I mean, the world is changing, and you guys actually provide a lot of crucial services that the rest of us benefit from. You know, things like sequestering carbon, protecting biodiversity, and don't rule it out that at some stage in the future you can start bargaining back and start sort of saying to people who want to see those outcomes further in the landscape, yeah, okay, then we're happy to do that for you, but how about we find some common ground that actually helps us as well. There's also the ability as a group like this to do your own peer sanctions, to rather than us coming all the time with the state, put your own controls around it, you know, put your own pressures to get the outcomes that you're after rather than us doing. It's a really important way that I think, you know, it's a mature way of going about doing business. And you know, final point here, I suppose, in terms of the future's, you know, the people talk about the future in the terms of VUCA, and it's the future's going to be volatile, it's going to be uncertain, it's going to be complex, and it's going to be ambiguous. So there's not going to be one correct way or one, you know, definitive method that's better than anything else. And what is one of the greatest things you can do to prepare for that is work collectively together. It's who you know. And you know, they call it resilience, your ability to adapt to change. And a big part of that is working together with people. You know, you look at natural disasters, the first thing that happens, people come together and they work together and sort out these problems and challenges. So, I mean, it happens at a scale like this, and you know, if something like a brand pulls that together, I'm fully in support of that. Yeah, basically that was it. If you have any questions, short, sharp, let us know. Other than that, yeah.